All right. We'll begin a very slow ashrei as people come onto the field. We may get to a minion. And okay, so ashrei begins on page 214. Asher Yushvi Veitecha Od Yahalilu Chasala Asher Yaham Shekachalo Asher Yaham Shadonai Elohav Tehillah LeDavid. Tehillat Adonai Yidaber Pi Vivarech Basar Shem Kodesh Olam Vahet Vanachnu Nivarech Ya Mi'atav Yad Olam Hallelujah Uvad L'Tzion Shavei V'yata kadosh Yoshev Tilot Yisrael V'karazel Ze Ve'amar Kadosh 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 Adonai Tzvaot Melo Kol Haaretz Kevodo. V'tisaheni ruach v'shmach arai korash gadol Baruch Kevod Adonai mimekomo Tilatu Adonai lo le'olam va'ed Adonai b'chutei. ויבטחו בך יודעי שמך, כי לא עזבת דורשך, אדוני. אדוני חפץ למען צדקו, יגדיל תורה ויאדיר. So we are going to proceed with a Torah service without taking out the Torah scroll. So we will have, I'm guessing, our Ba'alat Kriya is Rosemary. Yeah, are you reading for us? So we'll have you read for us, Rosemary, from Parshat Vayikra from a Chumash rather than from the Torah scroll itself. So we're beginning a brand new book of the Torah today. That book is Leviticus. It's Vayikra, and that book of the Torah is found in Eitz Chaim. I'll get you the page number. 587. Great. If you're following along in Eitz Chaim, we're on 587. And if you are following along in any Bible, it's chapter 1, verse 1 of Leviticus. That's what it means to start a new book of the Bible. And we're just taking one more beat to see if we have others joining us, since we're just shy of a minion here on the field. Not quite. So we'll begin 587. Oh, 585, actually. And I'll have you say the blessing for her study. Verse right here.
I repeat after you. ברוך אתה אדוני אלוהינו מלך העולם אשר קידשנו במצוותיו וציוונו לעסוק בדברי תורה.
אמן.
ויקרא אל משה וידבר אדוני אליו מאוהל מועד לאמור דבר אל בני ישראל ואמרת עליהם אדם כי יקריב מכם קורבן לאדוני מן הבהמה מן הבקר ומן הצאן תקריבו את קורבנכם אם עולה קורבנו מן הבקר זכר תמים יקריבנו אל פתח אוהל מועד יקריב אותו לרצונו לפני אדוני ושמח ידו על ראש העולה ונרצה לו לכפר עליו ושחט את בן הבקר לפני אדוני ויקריבו בני אהרון הכהנים את הדם וזרקו את הדם על המזבח סביב אשר פתח אוהל מועד והפשיט את העולה וניתח אותה לנתחיה ונתנו בני אהרון הכהנים בני אהרון ויקריב אהרון הכהן אש על המזבח וערכו עצים על האש וערכו בני אהרון הכהנים את הנתחים את הראש ואת הפדר על העצים אשר על האש אשר על המזבח וקרבו וקרב ירחץ במים והקטיר הכהן את הכל המזבחה עולה אשר רק ניחוח לאדוני ואם מן הצאן קורבנו מן הכסבים או מן העזים לעולה זכר תמים יקריבנו ושחט אותו על ירך המזבח צפונה לפני אדוני וזרקו בני אהרון הכהנים את דמו על המזבח סביב ונתח אותו לנתחיו ואת ראשו ואת פדרו וערך הכהן אותם על העצים אשר על האש אשר על המזבח והקרב והקרעים ירחץ במים והקריב הכהן את הכל והקטיר המזבחה עולה הוא אישה ריח ניחוח לאדוני.
Before we move forward in our service, which now that we have a minyan on a field, we'll do with Chatzi Kaddish and then be able to move on with a full repetition of the Amidah. But first we can do El Malei Rachamim acknowledgements of the yard sites, the anniversaries of the losses of loved ones. We have at least one here on the field. You can come forward. Where's AJ? You can come forward, and now that we have 10 on the field, we can take out the Torah to have you hold it, which I think is lovely. So I'll invite everyone to rise if you're able. So it's the second paragraph. As a beautiful and sweet Amale for your mom. I know that we remembered her just a few days ago, Tuesday night, Wednesday. Is there a particular memory that's coming to your mind right now of your mom that you'd like to share with us?
There's the presence of, or the absence, you know. Had a lot of people who've had losses lately, and really, you feel it. At that time, you feel
Sometimes it's that.
Something that goes for the rest of your life. It's not just once a year, but it's also something that we resonate with together.
Yeah, and other people's losses, it echoes.
Truly, I think maybe a fragment of my mother's soul has been resurrected in that cat. Because she challenges me. You know?
May her memory be for a blessing, and may she come to you, whether in the comforts of having a cat around or when you see others who are with you and you with them and their grief, and you are a comfort to others in our community. And may her memory continue to be for a blessing. Is there anybody else here who's on the field who has an Omali Rachamim to be recited in memory of a loved one this week? Do you see anybody who's on Zoom who's indicating they have one?
I'm not seeing any hands raised.
Actually, we'll do a returning of the ark, Torah to the ark. So what we'll do is we'll turn to page 221 in Lev Shalem or wherever the Torah service concludes in your book. I'll take this from you. Heard from left to right things. No, you do great. Okay. And if I could ask, Robert, could I honor you with opening the ark? Would that be all right? Ticha, thank you. So the ark is opened and we're returning the Torah to the ark. Hallelujah, Shema Adonai, ki nizkar shemo levado. Hodo al eretz v'shamayim v'yarm keren le'amo. Tila l'chol chasidav, livnei Yisrael am kerovo. Hallelujah, l'David mizmor. Yu ha'yamim yisada l'harayune. Mihu ze melech hakavod, Adonai tzvot melech hakavod, Selah uvnucho yomar. השיבנו אדוני אליך ונשובה חדש ימינו כקדם. So as the ark is closed, we do remain standing for those who are able to. For Chatzi Kaddish right now in Lev Shalem, we're on page 222. We're anticipating the whispered private Amidah. So as soon as we finish with Chatzi Kaddish, we'll go into those private Amidah modes in the continuing pages beyond. יתקדע ויתקדע שמי רבה, ויעמד דברה קירותי, וימליך מלכותי, בחיי חון וביומי חון, ובחיי כל בית ישראל, וגלה בזמן קריב, אמרו אמן, יהי שמי רבה מברך, לעולם ולעולמי עלמיה, יתברך וישבח, ויתבר ויתרומם ויתנשא, ויתהדר ויתעלה ויתעלה, שמי תקודשה בריחו, לעילם מן כל ברכתה ושירתה, תושבחתה ונחמתה, דמירם בעלמא, אמרו אמן. If you haven't yet completed your own private Amidah, you can continue at your own pace. The repetition of the Amidah begins on page 223. I'll lead us in the first opening blessings all the way through the Kedusha on page 225. And when I finish with the blessing Ha'el HaKadosh, you can be seated while I continue with the repetition. Again, right now we're on page 223. Baruch atah Adonai, Eloheinu v'Elohei Avotenu, Elohei Avraham, Elohei Yitzchak, v'Elohei Yaakov, אלוהי שרה, אלוהי רבקה, אלוהי רחל, ואלוהי לאה. האל הגדול, הגיבור והנורא, אל עליון. גומל חסדים טובים וקונה הכל, וזוכר חסדי אבות, ומביא גואל לבני בניהם למען שמו באהבה. מלך עוזר פוקד ומושיע ומגן, ברוך אתה אדוני, מגן אברהם ופוקד שרה. אתה גיבור לעולם אדוני מחיים איתי מתה, רב להושיע, משיב הרוח ומוריד הגשם, מכלכל חיים בחסד, מחיים איתי ברחמים רבים, סומך נובלים ורופא חולים ומתיר אסורים, ומקיים אמונתו לשני עפר, מי כמוך בעל גבורות, ומי דומה לך, מלך ממית ומחיה ומצמיח ישועה, ונאמן אתה לחיות מתים, ברוך אתה אדוני, וחיי המתים. נקדש את שמך בעולם כשם שמקדישים אותו בשמי מרום, כך כתוב על יד נביאך, וקרא זה אל זה ואמר. קדוש 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 אדוני צבאו מלוך על הארץ כבודו לעומתם ברוך יאמרו. ברוך כבוד אדוני ממקומו בדברי קודשך כתוב לאמור. ימלוך אדוני לעולם, אלוהי ציון לדור ודור, הללויה. לדור ודור נגיד גודלך ולנצח נצחים, קדושתך נקדיש בשבחך אלוהינו, מפינו לא ימוש לעולם ועד, כי אל מלך גדול וקדוש אתה, ברוך אתה אדוני האל הקדוש. אתה אחד ושמך אחד, ומקמך ישראל גוי אחד בארץ, תפארת גדולה ועטרת ישועה, יום מנוחה וקדושה לעמך נתת, אברהם יגל יצחק ירנן, יעקב ובניו ינוחו בו, מנוחת אהבה ונדבה, מנוחת אמת ואמונה, מנוחת שלום ושלווה והשקט ובטח, מנוחה שלמה שאתה רוצה בך, יכירו בניך, וידעו כי מתך היא מנוחתם, ועל מנוחתם יקדישו את שמך. אלוהינו ואלוהי אבותינו, רצה במנוחתנו, קדשנו במצוותיך, ותן חלקנו בתורתך, שבענו מטובך, ושמחנו בישועתך, וטהר ליבנו לעבדך באמת, והנחילנו אדוני אלוהינו באהבה וברצון שבת קודשך, וינוחו בה ישראל מקדשי שמך, ברוך אתה אדוני מקדש השבת. רצי אדוני אלוהינו בעמך ישראל ובתפילתם, וישב טוב ורע לדביר ביתך, ותפילתם באהבה תקבל ברצון, ותהי לרצון תמיד אהבת ישראל עמך, ותחזינה עינינו בשובך לציון ברחמים, ברוך אתה אדוני המחזיר שכינתו לציון, מודים אנחנו לך שתעונה אלינו. הטוב כי לא חלו רחמך, וימרחם כי לא תמו חסדיך, מעולם קיווינו לך, ועל כולם יתברך ויתרומם שמך מלכנו תמיד לעולם ועד, וכל החיים נותו חסלה, ויעללו את שמך באמת, האל ישועתנו ועזרתנו סלע ברוך. אתה אדוני, הטוב שמך ולחנאי להודות. שלום רב על ישראל עמך, ואל כל יושבי תבל תשים לעולם, כי אתה הוא מלך אדום לכל השלום, וטוב עיניך לברך את עמך ישראל ובכל עת ובכל שעה בשלומך, ברוך אתה אדוני הברך את עמו ישראל בשלום. I'm at the top of page 230. tzidkatcha tzedek leolam, v'tortecha emet, v'tzidkatcha Elohim, ad marom asher asita gedolot, Elohim chamocha, tzidkatcha ke'arehel, mishpatecha te'om rabba, Adamu v'hema toshia Adonai, Yitkadav, Yitkadash mirabah, v'hama tivrak yirtevim li'malchutei, v'chaychon v'mechon v'chayduch b'eit Yisrael, v'galev zman karif, v'imru, amen. Yishmehi rabah v'rach li'alam u'me'omaya, yiparach v'shabach v'yipar v'shama v'yitnaseh v'yitadar v'yitaleh v'yitalal, shemei dekudesha berichu, le'elam mincha v'yirchata v'shiratah tush b'chata v'nechamata, damiram be'alma v'imru, amen. Titkapel salotonu tandakol Yisrael kadam avohondi v'shmaya v'imru, amen. Yehi shlama rabba michamaya, v'chayim aleinu v'yokol Yisrael v'imru, amen. Ose shalom b'mromav, hu yaseh shalom aleinu, v'yokol Yisrael v'imru, amen. We rise for Aleinu 231. Aleinu l'shabeach l'adon hakol. Kakatu b'tor techadunai imloch leolam va'ed v'nehemar v'haya Adonai l'melech al kol haaretz b'yom hahu yihye Adonai echad u'shmo echad. Kadisha Tom Mourner's Kaddish, page 232. Yitkadal v'yitkadash shemei rabbah v'alma divra kirutei v'yamlich malchutei v'chayechon v'yomechon uv'chayei dechol beit Yisrael v'agala uv'zman kariv v'imru amen. Yehi shemei rabbah mevarach le'olam ulamei omaya. Yitbarach v'yishtabach v'yitpa'ar v'yitromam v'yitnatzeh. V'yithadar v'yitaleh v'yithalal shemei dekudsha berichu. Le'ela min kol birchata v'shirata. Tush b'chata v'nechamata. Damiran be'alma v'imru amen. Yehi shlama rabba min shemaya. V'chayim aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael v'imru amen. Oseh shalom bimromav, hu ya'aseh shalom, aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael, ve'imru, amen. Yishar kochach again to Rosemary for learning and then laning for us this week as we begin both the book of and the parsha of Vayikra. We say Shabbat Shalom to everybody who is here on the field and also those of us who are together via Zoom and YouTube. This afternoon, we're going to be learning with our rabbinic resident, Julia Novlach, in just a little bit. But first, we're going to nourish ourselves. Again, we encourage people to wear a mask over their nose and mouth as they come and get some coffee or nosh, or I don't know. I think I saw, what is that, tuna salad possibly? Am I dreaming? I'm not sure. But there's stuff here. Oh, wow. I'm sorry. I don't mean to make people jealous if you're watching on YouTube. Maybe you have something better than tuna salad at home, actually. So please go nourish yourself with something. Bring something to join us in just a short while, and we'll begin learning together.
the bookstore sells a sweatshirt.
But I think that, like,
Every football still on TV. I think baseball and basketball have fun with their champion. Yeah.
Robert, he was amazing.
Oh, Matthew?
Oh my gosh, like everything you would have imagined. And, like, yeah, I didn't closely.
Oh, I'm not surprised, but I'm sure. But I think the basketball. You know what? All of those things.
Yeah, I'm super. I really think that and we'd be lucky to be just here. But I hope you see whatever it is that you know. Your training would probably make him feel good too, because he wants to get it, and sometimes he's like, "Oh, can I just?"
Because he can hear the difference.
And he wants to get it, but he doesn't quite get it. He's like, "Oh."
And he has they did take the political science elective version of college last semester. They liked it. And then I had last spring this traditional civics class.
Wonderful. Did a great job.
The text was written by a team of clinical scientists, three botanicists. This is like traveling.
How long has it been since you had talked to me?
No, but I'm trying to look into issue
están comiendo.
Thank you. Great. Surprisingly. Huh? Surprisingly decent. Oh wow. That's good. Huh? Shop's over at about 6:30 or something like that. So, yeah, so if we start Mari at 6:20, that'll be good. Right. That? Yeah, I hope people partake. Well, I mean, we can still have to finish everything. Oh yeah,
We have a
right.
little bit of a buffer.
Okay, great. So should I plan for 6:15?
Sounds great. Sounds great.
Let me see. I don't see. Oh, there's the time. Okay, I can. Right. Where is this? I don't see. Oh. Yeah, it's a double feature. You are invited too. You just haven't RSVP'd yet. No one. Yeah. No pressure. I mean, it's anybody's guess. All right, so we're gonna start. So if you guys want to mosey over to your tables, I usually send the source sheet to the wonderful Susan at Betham, and then she prints it out, and then I pick it up when I get home here. I forgot to do that, and I ran out of paper, and I am also out of black ink. So what I have on Friday afternoon is what you got here. So the tables need to share, please. I apologize for that, but I'm glad that I have at least something. So, and obviously on the, I mean, I will read it anyway, but it's always nice to follow along. And those on Zoom, you probably have access to or had access to the source sheet that was sent out in the newsletter. I chose a poet today who I actually, even though he is such a big name in Hebrew poetry, I actually really didn't know anything about him. So that was one reason why I chose him. Saul Chernyshkovsky. And I had other reasons why I chose him. Like one reason is that I'm always trying to have some sort of connection to the Parsha or to the coming Parsha. And you may wonder, why did I choose a poem about a Canaanite idol if we are in between the coming together of all of Edat Israel and the Mishkan it has been built, and we say that let us go from strength to strength, and the next book that we open is the Torah Kohanim. So everything else, anything else but pagan worship, right? But I think I chose it precisely because of that, to have this sort of opposite and to give us a way to think about Canaanite worship, which, as Bible scholars tell me, is found a lot in what has become our right as well. But it's also because Chernyshkovsky was, and that was very interesting to read about that. So that was the main reason why I chose this poem or him.
but then as I read on, it became really interesting. I didn't know, and maybe most of you may know this. It was new to me that he was very anti established Judaism, and in his poetry, he has a whole series of poems where he explored pagan Canaanite worship and is writing about that and exploring the pagan world. And in that, even though he's later than the romantics of any country I can think of, in a way he is a late romantic in that he was interested in the natural world and in pagan worship because it seemed to represent a world that was free and liberated, and in the same time romantics, by their on one hand being drawn to the older established idealized worlds or systems, they are somehow very conservative, and at the same time they have this other pull of wanting to be very very free and rebelling against the establishment, if that is maybe considered one reason, not one reason, but one sort of like example. He married a non-Jewish woman, and everyone urged him at the time to have her convert, and he said, "I'm not doing it." And so there's a lot in this poem that speaks to that, not to the thing of the wife, but to all this sort of, and we're going to look into it. But I wanted to give that as an introduction. I have more to say, and I found it. I became very interested in realizing there are a lot of interesting things to say why one chooses one thing, even more so maybe than that specific poem, and that it may be obvious. He was born in, where are my several notes? He was born in 1875, and he was born in a village at the border between Crimea and Ukraine, and which I don't think I need to say much more about. So he wrote in Russian, but he was Ukrainian, and like many poets, non-Jewish and Jewish of that time, he found himself as a young man starting out as a poet in Odessa, which was a cultural center at the time where many other like poets lived. Obviously, also Bialik had been there, and what's the other one? Ahad, and other poets, and I thought it would be good to keep that in mind in terms of how Odessa was this the center where people from many different ethnicities and groups came together and celebrated art, and it was a very lively city. I brought a quote, also this being refugee Shabbat at Betham, I thought it kind of made sense to have a nod to this whole situation in Ukraine, and I brought an excerpt from a poem by Pushkin, translated into English, of course, which conjures up yet another place that has long been gone, but that also is gone there. And I just want to read it quickly. I lived then in dusty Odessa. There for a long time skies are clear. There steering an abundant trade sets up its sails. There all exhales, diffuses Europe, all glitters with the south, and brindles which life variety. Odessa, after all, wasn't the place for Jewish poets at the time. In the end, of course, and he made his way first into Germany and then into Palestine. And I brought a quote from Robert Alter that I'm just going to read in his introduction to these poems, because it speaks also to the theme of refugee Shabbat, and with the backdrop of the Ukraine and Russia war that's going on there. Circumstances forced Chernyakhovsky to be even more of a wanderer than Bialik. Because of the restrictions against admitting Jewish students, he had to study medicine outside Russia, first in Heidelberg, then in Lausanne, in Switzerland. After working within Russia as a doctor during the trying years of war and revolution, he discovered, as did everyone else connected with the Odessa literary group, that there could be no future for Hebrew writers under the Soviet regime, and he left Russia in 1922. An unsuccessful attempt to get a medical post in Palestine led to a 9-year stay in Germany, interrupted by several temporary moves in the hope of finding more satisfactory positions elsewhere in Europe. Like Bialik, Chernyakhovsky managed to settle in Palestine for only the final decade of his life. So that's also a kind of refugee. And those are kind of the things I wanted to share before we look at the poem. And it is a very rigid, it's very strictly structured. It's a Petrarchan sonnet, and it talks about a woman talking to Ashtorte, who is the female, one of the Canaanite idols of fertility, basically mostly associated with. I'm going to read it, but I hope I'm not going to butcher it because it's a sonnet. So actually someone who is fluent in Hebrew should read that, but I'm going to do my best, and then I'm reading the English, and you're invited to follow along. Ashtorti li, halo tasichi li, me'an hagai elenu vat, ha'im beyat kana'ani, me'ir lema'oz yam, bein galei shevo, tzidon vehal tzidon. הערבו לו בהר ועם ליל אלופי דן, האם בצרורות בד על דבשות גמלי דדן, ונעקות מעלות חול הפז בניין ונידן, נישאת עם אורחת שווה, נושקת רומא כידון, ולפניהם מתחת כל רימונים וסהרון רן, נפלאות לי, מה נפלאות עינייך יסמרקדים, אף כולך אסוך שן, יצורייך כה מתלכדים, ואין איש מגלה סוד, מי נתנך לי, אין איש. סלסילת תאנים לך, חפנתי קמח סולתי, משמן זיתי לוג, אלייך התפללתי. נהגיהו נעצך, אלי תביהו חיש. The translation is from the book where they usually don't give, they leave it more open because to convey more of the Hebrew, so it's not going to be a sonnet in English. Maya Starte, won't you tell me, from where did you come to us in the valley? Was it in the hand of a merchant of Sidon, from the city stronghold of the sea, the waves of Agati and Chalcedony? Did the chieftains of Dan lie in ambush for him on the mountain and at night? Was it in bundles of linen on the humps of Dedonite camels and she-camels raising the golden sand with their swinging and swaying, and before them the sound of pomegranate bells tinkling and singing crescent ornament? Wondrous to me, how wondrous to me are your eyes that are emeralds. Indeed, all of you they have made of ivory, your limbs linked together so. And no one reveals the secret, who gave you to me, no one. A little basket of figs for you, I have scooped up my best flour. A log of my olive oil, I have prayed to you. Lead him, a shining lad, bring him to me swiftly. And he wrote that in 1917. Yes, so I thought this poem is interesting, first of all, for its all formality, but ultimately my Hebrew is not good enough to go into in-depth analysis and point out all the intricacies, what he's doing with the language. At least it's not good enough yet. But I wanted to hand it over to you in terms of how do you relate to to this type of idealization of a perceived idyllic world, Brent? I don't know. He said he left Russia. Well, it says he left Russia in 1922. So either he was in Russia, right, and the Russian Revolution. Yeah. Yeah, it's very. I'm going to sum up what you were saying, and then first. So Brent made an interesting comment, which I didn't think you were going there, but I'm going to answer. No. It's great. Like 1917. It's World War One is still going on. The Russian Revolution is happening in 1917, as much as I remember, and so I thought you were going to criticize, and Brent was saying it is no wonder that, or it's not surprising that someone might want to turn away from all of that, having witnessed all of this brutality, and write a beautiful poem about a deity, basically giving life. I thought you were going to criticize him, so I'm appreciative that you pointed that you went that way, because it's a good point. Any Yes. The question is, when did he get his medical treatment? Because the war, of course, World War One was specifically brutal. I mean, not that any other war is not brutal, but we know that World War One was very, very, like a lot of. I have something else to say. Like so, it was having seen. He would have probably seen a lot of mutilated bodies on the Eastern Front, maybe even more so than on the Western Front. I don't know. Looking at this quote from Alto, so when he got his training as a doctor after working within Russia as a doctor, so he must have had during the trying years of war and revolution. So it says here, so he was already trained as a doctor, and he had during the years of the war and the revolution. So there's an Austrian writer, Georg Trakl, who writes his German. He's Austrian, but he's considered also German because he wrote in German, and he was in World War One. And there are a lot of those poets at the time who witnessed all this, the onslaught of the trenches, and turned to write very, very, very pessimistic, dark poetry. To your point, Kendra Chorney. Yeah, that's a great question. The question for those on Zoom is what do we know about why, basically? So several Hebrew poets writing in Hebrew write about topics that could potentially even be, considered more than anti. There would be like, yeah, heretical. I don't know. I wish I could answer that. My guess is that. My guess is that especially those people in the turn of the 19th century, like from the 1800s to the 1900s, those poets who came to Palestine, I think they had gone through so much hardship, and they did believe he believed in Palestine, right? Also, like Alter says that some of the best work of his last years was a response to the physical presence of the land of Israel and to the efforts of its rebuilders. So I would guess maybe it's a Zionistic interest, but a loss of faith in the traditional God of Israel. I read that Chernikovsky did not go through a traditional education, like starting in the Cheder, like Bialik did, for example. So he may have always had a different sort of perspective, but obviously he's not the only one. So I think there's a tension between the religion and the land that is always there, and that probably was very, very pronounced then. I don't know your name. Sorry, Jason. Yeah. Right, Newalt, yeah, Neualt. So Jason sort of supported and added new perspectives to what we've been talking about in terms of how it makes sense historically that a lot of people who came to Palestine saw themselves as Jews who didn't feel bound by religion, but they wanted to do something new, and would not write about religious faith. Whereas then there are other poets, especially in later years, that virtuously sort of combine these work of secular and erotic poetry, but using a lot of playing on the keyboard of religion. Another thought that I had in terms of maybe he is just, I have been looking at this side a lot. Is there anybody who wanted to say something? Okay, so looking at the poem and like sort of having in mind what he was interested in, it also kind of makes sense if one wants to say, or is like in character. There's this person who's interested in poets like Keats and Nietzsche and all these people who worship nature, like part of romantic poetry, like in the period, and what is considered romantic poetry is the worship of nature, right? Is the worship of nature as sort of like expression of freedom and of forces unbound and of anti-establishment, and all these things you find in what's considered not established religion, if you want to find it. And the other thing is, as I said, this conflict also between that the romantics have, I find, in way of, yes, they're always looking for like a different ideal utopian state of life or of nature, or and at the same time then they're interested in like the perfect shape of a Greek urn, or he has something too about an Apollon statue, and this sort of idealization of art as the perfect representation of nature. And at the same time, they often fall also in the trap of worshiping too much of yes, this ideal, you know, and making it exotic. Like on one hand, one in the poem, when we look about the caravan and the pomegranate belts, which actually I found obviously very interesting, because we have the pomegranate belts in the priestly garment. So there's a hint of that, and maybe because it is just so we can't separate it. It has potentially pagan, you know, origins, and it's a fertility image, and the priests in the temple walk around with it. Like it's very interesting. Did you want to say something? Okay. Right. Yes. Exactly. That's why it fits in this Havdalah. Yes. Right. Right. Hmm. Yep. There's so many interesting things in it. I'm gonna hard to summarize this for the folks on Zoom. Basically, question: was he a product and a poem of his time? Well, in that he, or was he even a foreshadowing what has happened for most of the 20th century in Israel? That people are really interested in archaeology, and he is sort of writing about that and putting like, that into focus. And And I want to say yes, in a way, but on the other hand, I also think that he idealizes the past. It's some of these descriptions to us, like this whole idealization of exotic Oriental caravans, and it has a lure, but also in that time there were a lot of cliches about it, and so I don't know if he was that type of poet who can be grouped into that. I do think that the interest in archaeology in Israel is very much can be seen for certain people just like as a confirmation of turning away from religion because it's archaeology and it's science and people have different ways of how they weigh one another. I think he was probably proud of his time in the way that he came to Palestine in the years that he did with the historic context that he carried with him and what that meant for his life. I think in terms of the poetry, at least that's what I've read about him and the poems that I've read beyond this, he seems to be emulating actually something that is a little bit gone in his sort of way to romanticize bygone eras. But I really liked, and it has come through in what several people have said in terms of how he turns to this fertility deity in a time of rebuilding, populating, and having seen tremendous loss. And I think that's a good moment to end on. I just thought of that. So I gave another poem on the source sheet actually, which is from an Australian romantic poet who also not Jewish, who writes about Ashtarte, Asherah, whatever it's several names. I'm not going to read it; it's very long, and I just gave it. It was interesting how, to the point of, there was a romantic Australian non-Jewish poet writing about the Canaanite fertility goddess. So anyway, that's it. Thanks for coming. And we're going to continue with Mariv. No, we're going to bench first, right? I have not eaten, so I cannot do it. Someone else. Az yomru vagoin, Donai la sotinele, Kila Donai la sotimani, Aim semetin, Shuva donu echivitenu, Afikim bane, Azorim bedima berina yiktoru, Halov yelehu vacho, Nafse meshechazara, Boyavo berina, Aseru motan. Yeah, so we'll be fine. We're not gonna keep it. Okay, so we're starting with Marif, which is on page 264. והוא רחום יכפה עוון ולא ישחית, והרבה להשיבה פה, ולא יאיר כל חמתו, אדוני הושיע המלך יעננו ביום קוראנו. We rise, please, because we are a minion. ברכו את אדוני המבורך. ברוך אדוני המבורך לעולם ועד. הוא מביא יום ומביא לילה, ומבדיל בין יום ובין לילה, אדוני צבאות שמו. חי וקיים, תמיד למלוך עלינו לעולם ועד. ברוך אתה אדוני המעריף ערבים. אהבת עולם ונשוא. כי הם חיינו ואורך ימינו, ובהם נהג יומם ולילה, ואהבתך אל תסיר ממנו לעולמים. ברוך אתה אדוני אוהב עמו ישראל. שמע ישראל אדוני אלוהינו אדוני אחד. אדוני אלוהיכם אמת. ומלכותו ברצון קיבלו עליהם משה בני ישראל, לך אנו שירה בשמחה רבה, ואמרו כולם מי כמוך באלים אדוני, מי כמוך נדע בקודש, נורא תהילות עושה פלא. מלכותך ראו בניך, בוקיים לפני משה, זה לי אנו ואמרו, אדוני ימלוך לעולם ועד. ונאמר כי פדה אדוני את יעקב, וגאלו מיד חזק ממנו, ברוך אתה אדוני גאל ישראל. ושמו צאתנו ובואנו לחיים ולשלום מעתה ועד עולם. ברוך אתה אדוני שומר עמו ישראל לעד. כי המלכות שלך היא, ולעולם את תמלוך בכבוד, כי אין לנו מלך אלא אתה, ברוך אתה אדוני המלך בכבודו, תמיד ימלוך עלינו לעולם ועד ועל כל מעשיו. חצי קדש, please rise. יתגדל ויתקדש שמי רבה, בעלמא דברה קירותי וימליך מלכותי, בחייכון וביומייכון ובחיי לכל בית ישראל, בעגלה ובזמן קריב ואמרו אמן. יהי שמי רבה מבורך לעולם ולעלמי עלמיה. יתברך וישתבח ויתפאר ויתרומם ויתנשא, ויתהדע ויתעלה ויתהלל, שמי דקודשה בריחו. לעילה מן כל ברכתה ושירתה, תושבחתה ונחמתה, דאמירן בעלמא ואמרו אמן. The silent Amidah begins on page 270. If you haven't finished your private silent Amidah, please continue. We are going to continue on page 280 with Kaddish Shalem. יתגדל ויתגדל שמי רבה, בעלמא דברה קירותי וימליך מלכותי, בחייכון וביומייכון ובחיי לכל בית ישראל, בעגלה ובזמן קריב ואמרו אמן. יהי שמי רבה מבורך לעולם ולעלמי עלמיה. יתברך וישתבח ויתפאר ויתרומם ויתנשא ויתהדע ויתעלה ויתהלל שמי דקודשה בריחו לעילה מן כל ברכתה ושירתה תושבחתה ונחמתה דאמירן בעלמא ואמרו אמן. תתקבל צילותון וברתון לכל ישראל קדם עוון דבשמיא ואמרו אמן. יהי שלמה רבה מן שמיא וחיים עלינו והכל ישראל ואמרו אמן. עושה שלום במרומיו הוא יעשה שלום עלינו והכל ישראל ואמרו אמן. עלינו on page 281. עלינו לשבח לאדון הכל, לתת גדולה ויוצר בראשית, שלא עשנו כגויי הארצות, ולא הושמנו כמשפחות האדמה, שלא שם חלקנו כהם, וגור עלינו ככל המונם, ואנחנו קוראים ומשתחווים ומודים לפני מלך מלכי המלכים, הקדוש ברוך הוא. ככתוב בתורתך, אדוני ימלוך לעולם ועד, ונעמד, והיה אדוני למלך על כל הארץ, ביום ההוא יהיה אדוני אחד, ושמו אחד. קדיש יתום. יתגדל ויתקדש שמי רבה. בעלמא דברה קירותי וימליך מלכותי, בחייכון וביומכון ובחיי דכל בית ישראל, בעגלה ובזמן קריב ואמרו אמן. יהי שמי רבה מבורך לעולם ולעלמי עלמיה, יתברך וישתבח ויתפאר ויתרומם ויתנשא, ויתהדר ויתעלה ויתהלל שמי דקודשה בריחו, לעילה מן כל ברכתה ושירתה, תושבחתה ונחמתה, דאמירן בעלמא ואמרו אמן. יהי שלמה רבה מן שמיא, וחיים עלינו והכל ישראל ואמרו אמן. עושה שלום במרומיו, הוא יעשה שלום עלינו והכל ישראל ואמרו אמן.
Shar Kohech, Julia, on your teaching and also on leading Ma'ariv. We're going to finish with Havdalah in a moment. If you would like to stick around and you're here on the field, there is a special Refugee Shabbat Havdalah program just over on Ziering Family Field, so just on the other side of the Elbaz Family Foundation Gymnasium. So we can... Thank you. I'm glad I got a good giggle. We are really looking forward to being with our friends at Beit Chaim Chadashim, BCC, who are here with us. My colleague Cantor Yuval Parat and I will do a different kind of Havdalah in just a little bit, sharing refugee stories over there on that field. That should be a really lovely program, celebrating the work that we do all year round and striving, because this is not a time for celebration on the other side of the world where they're struggling every day for peace, and we continue to pray for that peace and work towards that peace with them. And with that, we invite you to join in Havdalah, and you can rise in your places, or we hope wherever you are and you're joining us, that you join us in singing along. Yalai 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 Hine el Yeshuati, Eftach v'lo hevchad, Ki ozi v'zimaratya, Adonai vayehi li lishua, Ushaftamayim besason, Mimanei hayeshua, L'Adonai hayeshua, Alecha virchatecha zela, Adonai tzevaot, Imanu. Niskav lainu Elohi Yaakov Sela Adonai Tzevaot Ashrei Adam Boteach Bach Adonai Hoshia Hamelech Yaneinu Yom Koreinu La Yehudim Haitahora Besimcha b'sasom nikar Hein tihye lainu Kasi Yeshu hotesa Uv'shem Adonai ekra Yainenai 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 Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam borei peri hagafen. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam borei b'nei besamim. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam borei meorei ha'esh. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam hamavdil ben kodesh lechol ben or lechoshech ben Yisrael ha'amim ben yom hashvihi l'sheshet yemei ha'maaseh Baruch atah Adonai hamavdil ben kodesh lechol. Shavua tov, 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 Shavua tov. Wonderful to be with everybody this week. I'm going to go meet with my dear friends from BCC on the other field over there. It's great to see you. And one reminder that Fran Grossman's mother passed this past week, and the burial will take place on Monday. The funeral will take place first here on Corning 8, and it will be streamed. And then the burial will take place at Hillside. That'll be midday on Monday, mid-morning, and then midday. And then Shiva will take place, including daily minyan taking place at the Grossman residence for much of next week. So please stay tuned to that if that is a part of your regular rhythm. Shavua Tov, everybody.
Shavua tov. I only can sing it, and I wasn't sure if we wanted to sing it. So
Thank you. I appreciate that.
I know, and I am so appreciative of your being so helpful. When